introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? How long have you been at TACC?
My name is Joshua Fries. I've been at TACC for something like 4 years. I call myself the data wrangler,
Okay. Oh, that
which
works.
means I dig through all the various piles of data at TACC to report on what our users and what our machines do. I want to talk about data reuse and impact,
Okay.
focusing on one particular tool at TACC or project, which is Design Safe. Design Safe is a big project for natural hazards researchers. They run simulations on our computers. They publish pictures after disasters. They publish data sets of which kind of piers and beams support better when there's a hurricane or an earthquake or something like that. There's a bunch of moving pieces of Design Safe. One of them is a data repository, and that's the piece I'm mostly going to talk about. And that's where users store their projects and their publications.
All right. So who's going to benefit the most from what you're going to tell us about today?
Design Safe users, because we're getting ready to start reporting some more information about how your material on Design Safe is used. So that's probably the primary target, but also I'm looking at sort of an expanded view of how in the academic world data reuse is measured. Traditionally, the way this was measured was publications and citations. So you're really cool in the academic world if you publish a lot of stuff in respected places, books or journals, and you're also cool if people reuse your stuff and they cite it.
And this has changed over the years. Like how people acquire this and use this information that people are publishing.
Yes, because one of the things that we didn't used to have was an internet. So now
Imagine that.
there's lots of other ways to publish things besides in a printed journal or a printed book.
Yeah.
Or, papyrus and things like that, which we don't use quite as much anymore either. So you publish something online, one way that somebody reuses that is they publish a book or an article and they cite it. And that happens. Things get published on Design Safe and people cite them in their print publications. But the other way, or another set of ways that people reuse that, is they look at what you have online. They read it. We can count that in a way it's a little harder to count how many people actually read your article in this fancy journal or read your book.
Right.
There's a consortium of groups that are working on coming up with better ways to count this. What's an effective way? What's the most important thing that someone does with your work? And so one type of metric that has been come up with is a request, which a request in the Design Safe platform is anytime someone previews a file that you've published there, or they download it, or they copy it to somewhere else in the Design Safe platform.
Okay.
That's a request. So if you have a project with 10,000 files in it, and I look at every one, that's 10,000 requests.
Okay.
So that's some kind of important. But a question that can come up is that more or less important or the same as if somebody else publishes another project, another DOI? DOI is a digital object identifier. That's just a way of uniquely identifying and hopefully permanently identifying something that's published in a digital repository, something online in this way.
Mm-hmm.
So is that more or less important that I looked at 10,000 files in one publication that if someone else made a publication with one file and somebody looked at it?
Okay. Well, is it or is it not more important?
We count both.
Okay.
So the way we count, there's a concept of a unique request, which is, the simple version is one person looking at your project in a period of time.
Okay.
So a unique request means everything I looked at one DOI, one publication in Design Safe in an hour. And this was sort of a decision that was made by this consortium of groups. Okay, here's how we're going to count this. It's made a little more complicated in Design Safe because we don't require people to log in. So we have to come up with a sort of digital footprint that while respecting all the international laws, the European laws on privacy, California has privacy laws, but we've come up with a way of counting to distinguish if you look at something from if I look at something. I can't tell who you are, but I can tell you're not me.
Okay.
So if you look at somebody's publication, and if I look at someone's publication, that's two unique requests. So this is a way of measuring the impact, not just how many times anybody looked at it, but it gives a sense of how many people actually looked at your project. Obviously, there's some flaws here. If you come back next hour and look at the same thing you looked at before, that counts as another one.
Okay.
But we think it's a much more accurate way of measuring the impact that your project is having versus just the total number of times anyone looked at anything in a project.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a way to see how many people are interested in using your work.
Right. And the idea, or one of the ideas that this consortium of groups have, is that this should be counted in the areas that are important to people that citations have traditionally been, for things like, do you get hired? Do you get tenure? Do you get promotions? And it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? Because if my employer doesn't, or the group of people that I'm hoping to have as an employer don't care about this stuff, then why do I care about it? But why are the employers going to use it if no one's doing it? And so there's sort of a back and forth, and they've had lots of workshops on this, and it's sort of gradually becoming more important in research fields to have this kind of data. And so Design Safe, we've only just begun to be able to produce these numbers, and now we're submitting them to some of the partners in these consortia, and we'll be presenting. Some of them we're already presenting on the Design Safe platform, and we'll be presenting more of them.
You were mentioning PIs yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to see if we...
So I think that's, the PI, the principal investigator, the main person behind a project on Design Safe. These are probably most important to them, but also to the other people on the project. I will mention one other slightly broader metric that we're also measuring, which is an investigation. A request is looking at the actual data that you're publishing, the paper or the image or the sound file or a data set or a database. An investigation is all of those things, but it also counts someone looking at the metadata about your project.
Oh, okay.
So the metadata could be, who is the PI, when it was published. So when you first bring up a project in the Design Safe platform on the website, that doesn't show you actually any files, but it does show you a whole bunch of metadata.
Okay.
So that would be an investigation for all of the DOIs that are in that project.
Okay.
Then, if it's, say, an experimental project, there could also be a bunch of experiments. If I open up an experiment, that's an investigation just of that experiment, which has its own DOI.
Okay.
And then we can also measure those uniquely in the same way we can measure unique requests.
Okay. Do you feel like you covered everything?
Yes.
Okay. High five.
All right.
Joshua Freeze.